بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، صلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. نواصل معكم أيها الأخوة في الله مستمعين عبر إذاعة مكتبة الموحدين، هذه الدورة العلمية التي يشرح فيها كتاب الصيام من عمدة الأحكام للحافظ عبد الغني المقدسي رحمه الله تعالى. نستضيف في هذا اللقاء فضيلة الشيخ بندر الخيبري حفظه الله تعالى. We are continuing on pre-Ramadan seminar at Wahid publications in which the book of fasting from Umdatul Aḥkām by al-Hafiz Abdullāh al-Maqdisi rahimahullah is being explained. And tonight's guest is Sheikh Bandar al-Khaybarī, may Allah preserve him. فليتفضل شيخنا مشكورا مأجورا.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن سار على سبيله واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، وما زلنا أيها الإخوة وإياكم في رحاب متن كتاب عمدة الأحكام للحافظ عبد الغني المقدسي رحمه الله تعالى، وها نحن الآن في أواخر هذه الدورة المباركة، وحديثنا معكم اليوم في ما يتعلق بالأحاديث التي أوردها المصنف رحمه الله تعالى في فضل الصيام أو فضل بعض النوافل في باب الصيام. فذكر رحمه الله تعالى عن عبد الله بن عمرو بن العاص رضي الله عنهما قال: قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم: إن أحب الصيام إلى الله صيام داود، وأحب الصلاة إلى الله صلاة داود، كان ينام نصف الليل ويقوم ثلثه وينام سدسه، وكان يصوم يوما ويفطر يوما. هذا الحديث فيه بيان أفضل النوافل فيما يتعلق بالصيام والصلاة. فذكر عليه الصلاة والسلام أن أحب الصيام أي بعد الفريضة، لأن الفريضة لا يعدلها شيء، لقوله جل وعز في الحديث القدسي: ما تقرب عبدي بشيء أحب إلي مما افترضته عليه. الفريضة لا يعدلها شيء. عندما يذكر النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام أحب الأعمال في غير الفرائض فالمراد بها النوافل، أما الفرائض فهي أحب إلى الله عز وجل من سائر النوافل. الفريضة أحب إلى الله سبحانه وتعالى من سائر النوافل. لكن إذا فعل العبد هذه العبادة وهي الصيام ثم أراد أن يزيد في هذه العبادة، فأفضل العبادات وأحبها إلى الله عز وجل في هذا الباب، يعني في باب الصيام، كما ذكر عليه الصلاة والسلام صيام داود. فذكر عليه الصلاة والسلام أن هذا العمل وهذا النوع من الصيام أحب الصيام إلى الله سبحانه وتعالى، وفيه إثبات المحبة لله سبحانه وتعالى، خلافا للمعطلة الذين ينفون عنه هذه الصفة العظيمة. فإن الله جل وعز يحب بعض الأعمال ومنها هذا الصيام، يحب التوابين، يحب المتطهرين، يحب الذين يقاتلون في سبيله صفا كأنهم بنيان مرصوص، وغير ذلك من الأعمال. ويحب الله عز وجل الأشخاص، ولهذا ذكر النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام في غزوة خيبر أنه أخبر أصحابه رضي الله عنهم أنه سيعطي الراية غدا رجلا يحبه الله ورسوله ويحب الله ورسوله. الله جل وعز يحب علي بن أبي طالب رضي الله عنه وأرضاه، فهذا فيه إثبات المحبة لله عز وجل. الله سبحانه وتعالى يحب بعض الأشخاص ويحب بعض الأماكن ويحب بعض الأفعال والأقوال، ومنها ما جاء هنا أنه الصيام والصلاة التي كان عليها داود عليه الصلاة والسلام، ونسبت إلى داود عليه الصلاة والسلام لأنه هو أول من بدأ هذه العبادة، وهو أول من استنى أو من فعل هذه السنة. وكان رضي الله وعليه الصلاة والسلام كان عليه الصلاة والسلام أي داود كان يصوم يوما ويفطر يوما. هذا فيما يتعلق بالصيام. وكان عليه الصلاة والسلام ينام نصف الليل، أي أنه ينام عليه الصلاة والسلام من بعد صلاة العشاء حتى ينتصف. فإذا أراد الإنسان أن يعرف منتصف الليل فيقدر ما بين أو ما بعد أو من دخول وقت صلاة العشاء حتى طلوع الفجر، يقدر هذا الوقت ثم يقسمه نصفين، فالنصف الأول هذا هو النصف الأول من الليل. فمن بعد صلاة العشاء يصلي العشاء، ثم بعد أن يصلي العشاء يبدأ المنتصف الأول من الليل. فإذا كان مثلا يؤذن في الساعة 7 مساء والفجر يؤذن 7 صباحا على سبيل المثال، فنصف الليل يكون 6 ساعات تقريبا، نصفه 6 ساعات والنصف الآخر 6 ساعات. فكان عليه الصلاة والسلام مثلا ينام 6 ساعات، هذا هو نصف الليل ينامه عليه الصلاة والسلام، ثم يقوم ويصلي الثلث من النصف الثاني الآخر، يصلي ثلث الليل، ثم يرجع وينام هذا الجزء اليسير وهو السدس بين الفجر وبين صلاة النافلة. هذا أفضل العبادات، وهو أفضل لأنه يعطي البدن راحة، وأيضا فيه دلالة على الإخلاص لله سبحانه وتعالى. كيف ذلك؟ لأن الإنسان إذا قام يصلي من الليل ثم رجع ونام في السدس الأخير، يرجع وينام، الآن هو ينام نصف الليل ثم يستيقظ فيصلي ثم يعود إلى النوم فينام السدس الأخير من الليل. فإذا استيقظ يظهر على وجهه أنه كان نائما، ولا يدل على أنه كان يعني مستيقظا طوال الليل، فيبعد إذا رآه الناس يرون أنه قد لم يكن مستيقظا، كان للتو استيقظ من النوم وذهب إلى صلاة الفجر. فهذا لا يظهر على أي أحد أنه قام الليل، فهذا أدعى إلى الإخلاص وأدعى إلى إخفاء العبادة لكي تكون خالصة لله سبحانه وتعالى. نعم، تفضل.
السلام عليكم. Shaykh, may Allah bless and preserve him, began mentioning the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful, praising him, invoking the peace and blessings upon the Messenger, his family and companions, and those who follow in his footsteps until the day of resurrection. He then said, my brothers, we are continuing the study of the book Umdatul Aḥkām by al-Khaybarī, may Allah have mercy upon him. And as we come to the conclusion of this blessed Dawah, the Ḥadīth which we will be examining this evening have to deal with the fasting which is optional, the voluntary fast. So the next Ḥadīth we have reached in the text was reported by Abdullāh ibn Amr ibn al-As radiyallahu anhuma, who said that Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the most beloved fast to Allah is the fast of Dāwud, and the most beloved salah to Allah is the salah of Dāwud. He used to sleep half of the night, then stand in prayer for a third of the night, and then sleep a sixth of the night. And he used to fast a day and break fast for a day, meaning he would fast every other day. This is the text of the Ḥadīth. And it shows us which is the best optional acts of worship to Allah when it comes to fasting and salah. When he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that the most beloved salah, the most beloved fasting to Allah is the fast of Dāwud, what he meant was the most beloved fasting after the obligatory fast. This is referring to the voluntary fast, because we have the general principle from the Ḥadīth Qudsi, in which Allah Jalla wa Azza says, never does my servant come closer to me with anything more beloved to me than that which I have made obligatory upon him. So we need to understand that the most beloved of fast referred to here is of the different types of voluntary fasting, because that which Allah Azza wa Jalla loves absolutely most is the obligatory fast which he has made compulsory upon servants. If a servant does that compulsory fast and then wants to go a step further and do something voluntary, go the extra mile, then he has several different options in front of him, several different types of voluntary fasting. And of those types, the best, the absolute best, is that which is described here, fasting every other day, as was the practice of Allah's Prophet Dāwud alayhi salam. We find in this hadith an affirmation of the attribute of love which is attributed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We affirm this attribute that Allah loves certain people, certain things. And this goes in direct contradiction to the Mu'attilah, those who negate the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, including love and other than that from his attributes. Allah Azza wa Jal himself informs that he loves certain people. He informs that he loves the Tawwabin, those who are oft repentant, the Mutatahhirin, those who purify themselves. Informs that he loves those who fight in his path as if they were bricks that were connected in a strongly erected building. In the Battle of Khaybarī, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Tomorrow I shall give the flag to someone who loves Allah and His Messenger, and who is loved by Allah and His Messenger." And the following day, he gave that flag to Ali ibn Abi Talib. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves Ali ibn Abi Talib. The point is that love is one of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He loves certain individuals, He loves certain places, He loves certain actions, He loves certain statements. And from those actions that He loves are the fast of Dāwud alayhi salam. This fast is attributed to him alayhi salatu wassalam because he was the first person to fast in this fashion. He was the first person to establish this sunnah alayhi salatu wassalam of fasting every other day. And so he would fast one day, break fast the next day, and so on and so forth. That was his habit in fasting. His habit for making the salah at night, is that after the time for Salat al-Isha, he would go to sleep and sleep for half of the night. He would go to sleep after Isha and sleep half of the night. And if you want to know at what point, how to calculate the half of the night, then when the time for Salat al-Isha begins and the time for Salat al-Fajr begins, look at the number of hours between the two, divide it in half, and then add that to the time for Isha. And so, for example, if the adhan for Salat al-Isha was 7 p.m. and the adhan for Salat al-Fajr was 7 a.m., then you would take the number of hours, 12, divide it in half, which makes 6, and add that 6 to 7 p.m. That would give you the time in the morning where the half point of the night starts. So if you wanted to practice this, you would know when to go to sleep after Isha and what time to wake up. And so, if this were the case, that the night were 12 hours long, in order to practice this sunnah, we would sleep for 6 hours, then wake up and apply the rest. So we see that this description that is given of his salat, his prayer at night, alayhi salatu wassalam, that is Dāwud alayhi salatu wassalam, he would sleep for one half of the night, then pray for 1/3 of the night, and then for the last 6th of the night, he would go back to sleep. And that is the last 6th before Salat al-Fajr. So that short period, which is just before Fajr, he would go back to sleep and then wake up at Fajr time. And this is the best type of fasting because it gives the body the needed rest. And additionally, this is evidence of the ikhlas, of the sincerity of the person who is performing this type of prayer. Because the person who stands to pray before Allah Azza wa Jal at the night, he's also going to wake up for the Fajr prayer. If he stays up all night praying, it's going to be evident when he wakes up for Fajr, and people are going to see that he has been up all night, and they're going to know what he's doing. Whereas if the person prays half of the night, sleeps half of the night, prays 1/3 of the night, and then goes back to sleep for 1/6 of the night, when he wakes up, he's going to it's going to look like he's been sleeping. And so the fact that he's been up praying at night is going to be totally a secret. No one's going to have any clue, because like everyone else, he's going to be just waking up and look like a sleepy person, like we all look at Salat al-Fajr time. So it's going to be totally a secret. No one will have any clue that he has been awake for this part of the night, and this is going to make it more sincere. It's going to be more likely that he will have the sincerity in doing this only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it's going to be one of those hidden acts of worship that no one knows about except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. تفضل شيخنا.
نعم. ثم ذكر رحمه الله تعالى حديث أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أنه قال: أوصاني خليلي صلى الله عليه وسلم بثلاث: صيام 3 أيام من كل شهر، وركعتي الضحى، وأن أوتر قبل أن أنام. في هذا الحديث يبين أبو هريرة رضي الله عنه ما وصاه به النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام، والوصية هي العهد بالأمر المهم الذي ينبغي أن يعتني به الموصى له. فهذه الأمور الثلاثة تسمى وصية. لماذا؟ لأن النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام أراد من أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن يتعاهد هذه الأمور وأن يهتم بها وأن لا يدعها قدر استطاعته. وعندما ننظر في الحديث الذي مضى معنا قبل قليل نجد أن النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام لم يوصي أبا هريرة رضي الله عنه بصيام يوم وإفطار يوم، بل أرشده وأوصاه بصيام 3 أيام، لأن أبا هريرة رضي الله عنه كان منشغلا بالعلم وحفظ الأحاديث وجمع الأحاديث، فهو من أكثر الصحابة رضي الله عنهم رواية لحديث النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام. فلو قلنا مثلا أن الأفضل لطالب العلم أن يصوم يوما وأن يفطر يوم، أو أن يفعل بعض الأمور التي قد تؤثر على طلبه للعلم، على ضبطه للعلم، على مراجعته، على تدريسه ومدارسته وغير ذلك، يوصى طالب العلم بما أوصى به النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام أبا هريرة. فلا يكون لطالب العلم مثلا شيء يؤثر يعني على طلبه للعلم، لأن الصيام نفعه قاصر على الصائم فقط، أما طلب العلم فلا يعدله شيء كما قال الإمام أحمد، لأن نفعه متعدي. لأن طالب العلم هذا الذي يتعلم كيف يصلي، كيف يصوم، كيف يتطهر، كيف يحج، كيف يجاهد، كيف يأمر بالمعروف وينهى عن المنكر وغير ذلك من أمور العبادات، هو يبينها لنفسه ويلتزم بها لنفسه ويبينها للناس، فنفعه يتعدى غيره أيضا، يعني ينتفع به هو، ينتفع بهذا العلم، وينتفع غيره بهذا العلم. أما من يعني لم يكن له اهتمام بالعلم، أو لم يوفق للفهم الصحيح أو الحفظ أو الاهتمام بالعلم وغير ذلك، لكن وجد في نفسه نشاطا في الصيام، في الصدقة، في الصلاة، يرشد إلى هذه الأحاديث. فالنبي عليه الصلاة والسلام أوصاه بصيام 3 أيام من الشهر. البخاري رحمه الله تعالى بوب بابا فقال: باب صيام أيام البيض 13 و14 و15، ثم أورد حديث أبي هريرة هذا الذي معنا. فكأن البخاري رضي الله عنه فهم أن هذه 3 أيام هي المقصودة بالأيام البيض التي جاء الحث على صيامها عند أصحاب السنن وغيرهم من كتب الحديث. فمن صام 3 أيام من أي شهر، من أي وقت من الشهر، فقد عمل بوصية النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام لأبي هريرة. ومن صام هذه 3 أيام، أعني أيام التشريق، الأيام البيض، الأيام البيض 13 و14 و15، هذه التي جاء الاستحباب في صيامها والحث على صيامها. قال: وركعتي الضحى، أرشد إلى الركعتين، لأن أقل صلاة الضحى 2 وليس المراد فقط 2 ولا يزيد عليها، لأن النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام صح عنه أنه صلى الضحى 8 ركعات، وأيضا جاء في حديث آخر أنها 4 ركعات. فليس العدد هنا مقصود أنه مقصور على 2 فقط، بل أقل الضحى 2، وإن زاد فلا مانع من ذلك. وقوله: وأن أوتر قبل أن أنام، وأن أوتر قبل أن أنام، ولا سيما كما ذكرنا لكم الذي ينشغل بالعلم فقد ينشغل ويسهر في طلبه للعلم أو حفظه أو مدارسته أو بحثه أو غير ذلك، فإذا أراد أن ينام يوتر قبل أن ينام، لأنه قد يخشى عليه أن يطلع عليه فجر، فإذا طلع الفجر انتهى وقت الوتر. نعم تفضل.
This brings us to the next hadith, which was reported by Abu Hurayrah radiallahu anhu, who said that my best friend sallallahu alaihi wasallam advised me with three things: fasting 3 days out of every month, and praying 2 rak'ahs at the Duḥa time, and performing Witr before I went to sleep. In this hadith we find that Abu Hurayrah radiallahu anhu was given some advice by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the word that was used was a wasiyah. This type of advice, it's not any regular advice. There's a difference in Arabic between this word, which can be translated as advice, and other words that can likewise be translated as advice. This type of advice, a wasiyah, that was given by the Prophet ﷺ to Abu Hurayrah. Wasiyah is actually, it's like a covenant and a commandment that's very important, and which the person who is advised with should pay much attention to. What the Prophet ﷺ wanted from Abu Hurayrah in giving him this specific type of advice was for him to take into consideration these three things, making them like a covenant that he was going to remain consistent with and not be negligent with or leave them off to the absolute best of his ability. In the previous hadith we see that there was an encouragement for fasting every other day, which was the practice of Allah's Prophet Dāwud alayhi salam. And here we see that the Prophet ﷺ was advising doing something different. And this was because he was giving personal advice. He was giving personal advice to a specific individual. Abu Hurayrah radiallahu anhu was a companion who busied himself with knowledge. He busied himself with learning and revising knowledge. In fact, he was from the Sahaba who narrated the largest number of Ḥadīth from the Master sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so whoever is like him, whoever busies themselves with knowledge, can apply this to their personal situation. If we say that a person who is like Abu Hurayrah in busying themselves with seeking knowledge, the student of knowledge, if they were to try to apply the aforementioned hadith about fasting every other day, like was the practice of his Prophet Dāwud, this would have an effect on their seeking knowledge. It's known that fasting is going to deplete your energy. So if you're fasting every other day, this is going to deplete some of the energy that you have for studying, for memorizing, for staying up late to do research and the likes. And so this advice given by the Prophet ﷺ was personalized advice, something that was going to be consistent, small yet consistent, and it was not going to distract him from what he was doing for the pleasure of Allah, which was seeking and disseminating knowledge. And when we look at the benefit of seeking knowledge, we find that it's greater than that of fasting. How so? When you fast, you benefit, but no one else does. Whereas if you seek knowledge, you benefit, and potentially many, many other people do. As Imam Ahmad rahimahullah said, seeking knowledge, there is nothing comparable to it. It is with the correct intention. Nothing can compare to the benefit of seeking knowledge, because the benefits are not only for the person who does it, but for many other people. Potentially, years and years after they die, they write down books and the likes. So the student of knowledge learns how he is supposed to pray, how he is supposed to fast, how he is supposed to perform his pilgrimage, how he is supposed to perform jihad, how he is supposed to enjoin the good and forbid the evil. And so the person who is busying himself with seeking knowledge benefits himself and benefits others, because he teaches what he learns. So this benefit is widespread. If a person finds that the door has been opened for them for walking this path, they can apply the hadith of Abu Hurayrah to themselves, being consistent with something small, something consistent, 3 days every month, such that it's not going to distract them from their efforts in seeking knowledge. The person found that this door was not open for them, yet they had a lot of energy. They had a lot of zeal for fasting, doing other acts of worship. They could apply the other hadith, the hadith of the fast of Dāwud, to themselves. It's as if Imam al-Bukharī, rahimahullah, Sahih, understood from this that these 3 days mentioned in the hadith of Abu Hurayrah were the 3 white nights at the middle of the lunar month, when the moon is full, when there's a full moon. And it's as if he applied this to what is mentioned in other hadith in the Sunan of the encouragement to fast the white nights, or the nights when there's a full moon in the middle of the lunar month. If a person, however, is to fast any 3 days at any time of the month, be them the white nights in the middle of the month, at the beginning of the month, the end, at any time, if a person fasts absolutely any 3 days of the month, they will have applied what was given as advice here to Abu Hurayrah radiallahu anhu. So this was the first piece of advice that Abu Hurayrah radiallahu anhu said that he received from Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to fast 3 days out of every month. The second piece of advice he said was, he advised me to pray 2 rak'ahs of Duḥa, to pray those 2 rak'ahs in the morning time after the sun has already risen, but well before the time of midday. The minimum, if a person wants to pray Salat al-Duḥa, is 2 rak'ahs. But what is meant here is not pray 2 rak'ahs and don't pray anything more. A person could pray more. The maximum that we find in the narrations describing Salat al-Duḥa is 8. A person can pray a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 8 for Salat al-Duḥa. We have in another narration, Salat al-Duḥa is 4 rak'ahs. And so what is meant here is explaining what should be the minimum if a person wants to take advantage of making a salat during this time of the day, the morning time. Then the minimum is 2. But if a person wants to pray more than that, there's no problem. The third and final piece of advice the Prophet ﷺ gave to Abu Hurayrah in this hadith was to make witr before going to sleep. And this, again, was personalized advice. Why? Because unlike others of the companions, Abu Hurayrah radiallahu anhu, he stayed up late at night revising his knowledge. So the student of knowledge who does likewise, who is researching after Salat al-Isha, who is memorizing after Salat al-Isha, who is busying himself with the pursuit of knowledge in the hours of the night, and there's a possibility that he's going to miss that last third of the night, that special time when witr is made, when it's best to make witr, and witr can be made at any time of the night, at the beginning, middle, or the end. The best time is the last third of the night. But if a person, because they're staying up late, fears that they won't be able to wake up in time to make it, and they're just going to wake up for Fajr and that's it, then they can apply this hadith to themselves likewise. They're busying themselves with acts of worship in the first part of the night. They can go ahead and make witr the first part of the night to ensure that they don't miss out on it in the last part of the night. تفضل شيخنا.
نعم. ثم أورد المصنف رحمه الله تعالى حديث جابر رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم نهى عن صوم يوم الجمعة. وأيضا أورد حديث أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أنه قال: سمعت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: لا يصومن أحدكم يوم الجمعة إلا أن يصوم يوما قبله أو يوما بعده. المصنف رحمه الله تعالى في هذا الباب يذكر باب ما جاء في فضل الصيام وغيره، يعني فيما جاء في بعض الأحاديث التي جاء فيها فضل الصيام كصيام يوم وإفطار يوم، صيام 3 أيام من كل شهر. ثم أورد المصنف رحمه الله تعالى الأحاديث التي تتعلق بالأيام التي جاء النهي عن صيامها، بالأيام التي جاء النهي عن صيامها. وبدأ رحمه الله تعالى بالأحد الأيام التي يكون فيها النهي أخف، أنه بعد ذلك سيذكر يومي العيد كما سيأتي معكم إن شاء الله تعالى غدا، أن النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام نهى عن صيام يومي العيد، عيد الفطر وعيد الأضحى. فالنهي عن صيام يوم عيد الفطر ويوم عيد الأضحى هذا نهي للتحريم. أما النهي هنا في يوم الجمعة أو النهي للكراهة، لأن يوم الجمعة شابه يومي العيد لأنه عيد الأسبوع، ولا يصح للإنسان أن يخصصه بعبادة أو يخصص ليلته بقيام. فيوم الجمعة عيد الأسبوع، كما أن عيد الفطر وعيد الأضحى هم عيدا السنة. لكن التحريم هنا أو النهي هنا للكراهة عند جماهير أهل العلم، أن النهي عن صوم يوم الجمعة للكراهة، أي أنه يخصص يوم الجمعة في صيام لأنه يوم جمعة، هذا أمر مكروه، هذا أمر مكروه. أما إذا كان يصوم يوم الجمعة أنه يوم عرفة مثلا، أنه يصومه أنه يوم عرفة في غير الحاج ووقع في يوم الجمعة فلا كراهة. أما المقصود ليس تخصيص الجمعة بصيام، ليس المقصود أن يخصص يوم الجمعة بصيام، بل المقصود هو عرفة مثلا، المقصود هو عاشوراء، المقصود صيام 3 أيام من كل شهر، المقصود صيام يوم وإفطار يوم. والنبي عليه الصلاة والسلام قال قاعدة عظيمة جدا: إنما الأعمال بالنيات. فالصيام واحد ويقع في يوم واحد، لكن تختلف النية. إن كان القصد الجمعة، تخصيص الجمعة بصيام، فنقول هنا نهى النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام عن صيام يوم الجمعة، تخصيصه بصيام هذا أمر مكروه. لكن إذا كان يصومه لغير قصد الجمعة، يصومه لعاشوراء، يصومه لعرفة، يصومه لقضاء، يصومه لنذر، نذر يعني مثلا أن يصوم 3 أيام أو نحو ذلك ومن ضمنها يوم الجمعة، فهنا لا كراهة. وأيضا تزول الكراهة كما في حديث أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أنه إذا صام وأراد أن يصوم يوم الجمعة فلا بد أن يسبقه بصيام الخميس أو أن يلحقه بصيام كيوم السبت، يصوم يومي السبت والجمعة، أو أن يصوم يومي الخميس والجمعة. فهذا الأمر أو هذا عفوا النهي للكراهة. لكن إذا احتاج الإنسان أن يصوم يوم الجمعة فهنا كما يقول أهل العلم أن الكراهة تزول مع أدنى حاجة. مثال ذلك أن رجلا مثلا يعمل طيلة الأسبوع وليس عنده يوم إجازة إلا يوم الجمعة، فهنا يريد أن يصوم مثلا يوم الجمعة، يريد أن يتقرب إلى الله عز وجل تقربا مطلقا لا يقصد به يوم الجمعة، أو أن يريد أن يقضي مثلا، هذا أظهر، يريد أن يقضي يوما مثلا في رجب أو في صفر أو في غيره، يريد أن يقضي يوما عليه في رمضان وليس عنده مثلا وقت أو إجازة، عمله قد يكون شاق، قد يكون في وقت لا يناسبه الصيام في يوم الأحد والاثنين والثلاثاء وسائر الأيام، قد يكون عنده عمل شاق يصعب عليه الصيام فيريد أن يصوم يوم الجمعة، فنقول هنا الحاجة ترفع الكراهة، الحاجة ترفع الكراهة. هذا أيها الأحبة فيما يتعلق بهذه الأحاديث التي خصصت في هذه الدورة المباركة، التي نسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى بمنه وكرمه أن ينفعنا بما قلنا ونجعلنا ممن يستمع القول فيتبع أحسنه، ونجعلنا في هذا الشهر الذي سيضللنا في هذه الأيام القليلة المعدودة أن يجعلنا من المقبولين، وأن ييسر لنا القيام والصيام وتلاوة القرآن، وأن يجعلنا من المقبولين ومن عتقائه من النار، إنه ولي ذلك والقادر عليه. والله سبحانه وتعالى أجل وأعلى وأحكم، وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.
أحسن الله إليكم وبارك فيكم، نفع الله بما كنتم شيخنا. أستأذنكم في طرح سؤال واحد.
نعم تفضل. نعم تفضل.
نعيد السؤال يا شيخ.
نعم.
طيب، تقول السائلة: امرأة بها استحاضة وتتوضأ لصلاة العشاء في أول وقتها، هل يصح وضوءها هذا لصلاة التراويح ولو استمرت إلى نصف الليل، وأنها تحتاج إلى تجديد الوضوء؟
نعم، الاستحاضة بارك الله فيكم هو دم يعني يجري في غير عادته، لأن المرأة تحيض في كل شهر، ودم الحيض معروف له لون معين ورائحة معينة وله ألم معين تعرفه النساء، له رائحة معينة وله لون معين وله ألم معين تعرفه المرأة وتحس به، فهذا هو الحيض. ثم هناك دم يخرج أيضا من المرأة في غير هذه العادة ولا يحمل هذه الأوصاف، وقد يستمر معها شهر أو شهرين أو 3 أو 4 لا ينقطع أبدا، بل وجد ذلك في زمن النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام، فيما يعني روت فاطمة بنت أبي حبيش أنها كانت تستحاض ولا تطهر، أي أن كان الدم يسير عليها مستمرا. هذا ليس دم حيض، دم الحيض محدد بوقت معين، لكن قد يزيد هذا الدم فينقلب إلى استحاضة. من به استحاضة فهذا يتوضأ لكل صلاة، مثلا دخل وقت صلاة العشاء يتوضأ، ومثله من به سلس البول أو من به إطلاق الريح أو غير ذلك من نواقض الوضوء، إذا استمر معها هذا الأمر أو غير هذه النواقض فإنها تتوضأ لكل صلاة. فإذا دخل وقت صلاة العشاء تتوضأ وتصلي العشاء وتصلي السنة التي بعد العشاء وتصلي التراويح وتقرأ القرآن حتى منتصف الليل، وكذلك في صلاة الفجر وكذلك في صلاة الظهر وغير ذلك، فتتوضأ لكل صلاة حتى وإن خرج الدم معها قبيل الصلاة أو أثناء الصلاة أو بعد الصلاة أو غير ذلك، فلا تتوضأ إلا لصلاة الفريضة. لكن إذا كان الدم يعني مثلا قليل جدا، يعني هو يستمر معها في الأيام لكنه يكون في الصباح ولا يكون في المساء، فهذه الأحوط أن تتوضأ يعني لهذه النافلة، لأنه إذا خرج منها مثلا ثم توضأت فتصلي التراويح وتقرأ القرآن ولم يخرج منها شيء، هذا الأحوط والأفضل لها أن تتوضأ لهذه النافلة، وإلا فيكفيها وضوء العشاء، والله سبحانه وتعالى أعلى وأحكم وأعلم. نعم.
بس كذا أتأكد يا شيخ، يكون مستحب أن تجدد الوضوء للتراويح ولكن يكفي الوضوء لصلاة العشاء؟
نعم هذا يكفي، وضوء العشاء يكفي، لكن قلنا إذا كان يستمر معها الدم فنقول لا يكفي هذا وضوء العشاء، لكن إذا كان ينقطع كثير جدا، يعني بعضهم مستحاضة تستحاض يعني شهرين أو شهر أو كذا، لكن يظهر معها في الصباح لا يظهر في المساء، وينقطع 6 ساعات ويعود وهكذا، تختلف النساء في هذا.
أيوه.
هذه بارك الله فيك إذا جاءت النافلة تتوضأ، الأحوط أنها تتوضأ عند النافلة أيضا، قد لا يخرج منها شيء لكن يكفيها أيضا، الواجب عليها أن تتوضأ لكل صلاة كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام، فيكفيها لنافلتها وفرضها.
نعم، جزاك الله كل خير يا شيخنا.
آمين، حياكم الله، بارك الله.
الله يحفظكم ويبارك فيكم.
آمين. السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. The following hadith was reported by Muhammad ibn Abdullāh ibn Ja'far, who said that I asked Jabir ibn Abdullāh whether or not the Prophet ﷺ forbade fasting on Fridays. And he said yes. And in the narration in Sahih Muslim, he said yes, by the Lord of the Kaaba. And the hadith right after it deals with the same issue, narrated by Abu Hurayrah radiallahu anhu, said that I heard Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, "Let not any of you fast on Friday unless he fasts a day before it or a day after it." So the author, rahimahullah ta'ala, is Al-Hafiz Abdul Ghani al-Maqdisi, Allah have mercy upon him. In this chapter, in the book of fasting, he's dealing with, and this subchapter is entitled, the virtue, the virtue of fasting and other than that, meaning that this was talking about the voluntary acts of fasting, the voluntary fast, and some other issues that are related to fasting, but not necessarily the obligatory fast of Ramadan. So we find that the hadith was mentioned about the best fast, which was the fast of Dāwud, fasting every other day. The hadith of Hurayrah, which described the encouragement of fasting 3 days out of every month. And then we find here what was forbidden from fasting, that we have a prohibition of fasting on Fridays. And the author, rahimahullah, began with the light forbidding, meaning that the prohibition here, the prohibition is not something that is strictly forbidden, that under no circumstance may you fast on a Friday ever. What is meant here is that this is makruh. It is makruh to single out Friday for fasting. After this, we find the hadith which strictly forbids fasting a particular day, or 2 particular days, which are the days of Eid. The days of Eid, it is haram, it's strictly forbidden to fast on either the day of Eid al-Fitr or the day of Eid al-Adha. Fasting on Friday is similar to fasting the day of Eid, because Friday is essentially the weekly Eid. It is a weekly Eid. And so we are not to single out Friday for fasting during the day, nor are we to single out Friday night for standing in prayer, aside from the other nights of the week. Even though Friday is a special day, it is a weekly Eid, we are not to recognize that day being special by standing at night in prayer while we don't stand the other nights in prayer. This is not the way to observe the sanctity of this day, nor by fasting it. And so the Prophet ﷺ forbade fasting on Friday alone, and this is a prohibition of karaha. It's not a prohibition of tahrim, so it is discouraged, strongly discouraged to fast on Friday, according to the opinion of the majority of the people of knowledge. If a person, on the other hand, fasts Friday, not because they're singling out the day for Friday, because it's Friday, but because the day of Arafah happens to fall on a Friday, and we have the encouragement in the Sunnah to fast the day of Arafah. If a person fasts on the day of Arafah, and Arafah happens to fall on a Friday, this prohibition does not apply. There's no problem whatsoever with fasting the day of Arafah and fasting Friday alone because of the day of Arafah. Likewise, if a person were to fast the day of Ashura, if Ashura fell on a Friday, there's no problem with fasting the day of Ashura when it falls on a Friday, and this prohibition mentioned in Hadith doesn't apply. Likewise, if we were to apply the Hadith of Hurayrah, as Imam Bukharī did, rahimahullah, of fasting those 3 days out of every month, and we said that these 3 days were the white nights, the days of the full moon, the 13th, 14th, and 15th days of the lunar month. If one of those days happened to fall on a Friday, it would not be forbidden. It would be okay, because the intention of fasting here is not singling out the Friday. The prohibition here is for singling out Friday. If a person is fasting to catch those white nights, to fast in the middle of the month, that's okay. The prohibition here is fasting and singling out the Friday. And we have, when it comes to all of this, a general principle which dictates most, if not everything, that we do as acts of worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the statement of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Deeds are only but by intention. Deeds are but by their intentions. So if a person happened to be fasting on a Friday, whether or not it's permissible or prohibited for him depends on his intention. He's fasting Friday because it's Arafah, it's okay. So he's fasting because he wants to single out Friday? No, it's not. He's fasting on Friday because it's Ashura, it's okay. He's fasting to single out Friday? No, so on and so forth. Depends on what is intended here. And so we do have a prohibition of singling out the day of Jumu'ah, the day of Friday. But that's not a strict prohibition, it's a discouragement. And so it's karaha, it's not tahrim. Then we have the hadith following it, hadith of Hurayrah here in the text of Umdatul Aḥkām, which says, that he heard Allah's Messenger ﷺ say, "Let not any of you fast on the day of Friday unless he fasts additionally a day before or after it." And so, likewise, we have this prohibition of fasting Friday. But if a person fasts Thursday and Friday, it's okay. If a person fasts Friday and Saturday, then it's okay. The prohibition applies to fasting Friday alone because it's Friday and for no other reason. Also, if a Muslim needs to fast on a Friday because of their circumstances, it's not discouraged, and the karaha is removed. For example, we have a person who works 6 days a week. The only day he gets off is Friday. And he missed some days in Ramadan because he was sick. And the nature of his work is very physical, very strenuous work. And for him to fast while working is difficult. And so it's easier for him, because of his schedule, to make up his days that he missed from Ramadan on his day off for the week, which is Friday. So there's no problem with him making up his missed days from Ramadan on Fridays, his one day off per week, even though he's not fasting Thursday and Friday, and even though he's not fasting Friday and Saturday. He's allowed to, because his intention is not singling out that day. His intention is missing up the days that he missed from Ramadan in a way that's most convenient for his work schedule. So this brings us to the conclusion of the hadith that we're looking at for this evening. The Shaykh Ta'ala said, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by his generous bounty to make what we have heard a benefit to us and evidence for us, not against us, on the day that we meet our Lord. And in a very short, in just a few very short days, the month of Ramadan will be upon us, in which we are commanded to fast. We are recommended to stand in prayer at night. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to see that month. We ask Him subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept of us our fasting and prayers, and we ask Him subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us those who are emancipated from the hellfire during that blessed month. Allah knows best. Finally, there was a question from one of the sisters, and the question was that if a woman has istihaba, meaning that she has a continual flow of blood, not only during the time of her menses, but perhaps that flow of blood continues long after her menses, or maybe it even lasts for all the time, or it lasts for a month straight or more. It's istihaba. If a woman has istihaba and she makes wudu for Salat al-Isha, and see if I can word it with the exact wording that she did instead of summarizing as I have in Arabic. The question that she wrote was, a woman suffering from istihaba or continuous discharge, when she makes wudu for Isha at its beginning time, is that wudu still valid to pray Taraweeh even if it goes into the middle of the night, or does she need to make a new wudu? Barakallahu feekum. The Shaykh Abdullāh Ta'ala said that istihaba, this flow of blood outside of its normal time, flow of blood outside of the time that a woman normally sees her menses. This is the definition of istihaba, which is different from hayl or menses. Because hayl, the blood of menses, has a color which is distinct and well known to the women, and a scent or smell which is likewise well known to the women, and a woman feels pain at that time of the month. This is something well known to the ladies. Anything that doesn't meet that description, the blood that comes out other than the normal time of the period and doesn't have that color or that scent, is to be counted as istihaba. At times, this istihaba will continue for a month or 2 months, and this was present in the time of the Prophet, as we find that narrated by Fatima bint Abi Hubaysh, she was a person who had this istihaba. And what the Prophet ﷺ commanded her to do was to make wudu for every single salah. To make wudu for every single salah. Normally, if a person makes wudu for one salah and doesn't break wudu for the next salah, they don't have to make wudu before Maghrib, and you don't do anything to break wudu. At Isha time, you don't have to make wudu. A woman who has istihaba, on the other hand, she does. She has to make wudu for every single salah, even though she doesn't break the wudu. The Shaykh Ta'ala said the same applies to a person who has what's known as salis bawl, which is a continuous dripping of urine. Some people are incontinence, perhaps they call this. A person has a constant discharge of urine. Other people may have a constant passing of gas. So whoever is afflicted with one of these things, then the same ruling, the same instruction that the Prophet ﷺ gave for istihada applies to them, that they are to make wudu for every single salah. Now, once they have made wudu, once the time has entered for that salah, and that wudu that's made must be once the time is entered, the time of the adhan. So once they have made the wudu for that obligatory salah, that same wudu counts for what goes along with the obligatory salah of voluntary salah. So in this case, the woman asked about making wudu as soon as it's time for Isha. Can she still make Salat al-Tarawih with that wudu? And the Shaykh said yes. Yes. She makes wudu for Isha, she prays Isha, and she prays 2 rak'ahs after Isha, and she prays Salat al-Tarawih, and she sits to read Quran with that same wudu. He said, and the same applies for the other prayers, for Salat al-Fajr and Duḥa and the likes. Even if she has a discharge of blood while in the salah, even if she's praying Isha, even if she's praying Tarawih and there's a discharge of blood, she's followed the instructions and made the wudu before the salah, so that wudu counts for the salah itself and the voluntary acts, voluntary salah and reading of the Quran and the likes that follow that salah. And so, even if it's a small amount of blood, the Shaykh went into some details about whether or not it's blood that flows all throughout the day or all throughout the month. The gist of it is that she can use this wudu for her Isha and Salat al-Tarawih. Doesn't have to make a new wudu for Salat al-Tarawih. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam.